Welcome in to another episode of Betting the Pitch. I'm your host, the real underscore G Warner on Twitter, Instagram, Patreon, wherever you can find me. This is a baseball podcast. Took the Labor Day weekend a little bit too strong. So we're doing a Tuesday MLB card instead of Monday, which is good because everyone should be playing, assuming the weather holds up. We'll have a best bet end of show like always. I'm not really sure what I'm doing for the international break that's coming up soccer wise. Though please check out the NFL Futures podcast that I just put out with one of my good friends, Andrew Schnicker. We have plans to come out with an episode every week. One might be recording, I think, tomorrow night or either Tuesday or Wednesday nights going forward. If you have any interest or feedback on that, please slide in some DMs at the real underscore G Warner on Twitter or Patreon. And we're going to try to come out and break down the NFL lines where we expect numbers to move, numbers we want to lock in right away. I think it will be a very good and informative site or podcast and a great spot for me to at least get my thoughts out to all of you as well. Andrew's really deep, a lot deeper in the game than I am, but I'm hoping to get on his level sometime soon. Other than that, I guess we'll figure out what else the schedule will look like. It just doesn't seem like the international break is really that interesting to anybody, though there is money to be made, I think, especially betting the Euro qualifiers for Germany next summer, which I do plan to attend. If you're on Spotify, please leave a 5-star review. Same goes for Apple Podcasts. If I see any of those, I will read them. If you're on YouTube, please hit subscribe, as there's a million more of you that we need to get on there to start turning into a real channel, according to them. But we'll get there eventually, hopefully soon enough. If you're not a member of my Patreon or you're not a patron there, check it out. Patreon.com/the_real_G Warner. You get direct access to me, my leans, my write-ups, my plays as soon as I lock them in, so you don't have to wait on Twitter. And it's also a really great spot, especially if you subscribe to me on other applications or other areas. Might be a more cost-friendly, cost-effective, so you don't have to miss days during the week or the month or even the season to try to get my thoughts. Go check that out, patreon.com/the_Real_G Warner. And then let's get into this. All lines quoted in this podcast are courtesy of betonline.ag, my favorite place to get my bets down early. Reduced use is offered on almost every game you want to bet right up until game time. Please follow the link found in the podcast description to fund your account. Use promo code GW50 to receive a 50% match bonus up to $1,000. I do believe this has to be for new accounts, but if you're in one of the states that does allow online gambling and maybe you haven't checked out BetOnline just yet, really helpful for you to have an extra out or better. I mean, it's way better for the business of sports betting to have more options, get better juice, better numbers. Even you might get a key number at one place that you wouldn't at another. Plus the juice at BetOnline is really hard to beat across most of the platforms where I do a lot of my volumes. So check that out. The link will be in the podcast description. And I think let's jump into the baseball card for Tuesday. So first matchup looks like start in rotation order. So we'll start in the National League. Brandon Woodruff starting for the Milwaukee Brewers at Pittsburgh, who have an undecided, looks like a bullpen game for them. Looks like Woodruff's about a -180 favor right now. Over under is 8.5, juice to the under. Pittsburgh with a good win tonight. I think I guess it's 2 straight losses for Milwaukee, if not more than that. I know they won Friday night last weekend, but beat Corbin Burns tonight was pretty impressive. I don't know that Pittsburgh will continue to do that, but they've been playing pretty well lately. Got a lot of respect from the marketplace in their series at St. Louis. So maybe this is a good time for the Buccos. They're trying to prepare for next season. Not a lot for me to want to get involved with here until I know what the Pittsburgh rotation or what the pitching is going to look like for tomorrow night. Next, we'll move to the Dodgers visiting the Miami Marlins. We got Clayton Kershaw on the mound against Jesus Luzardo. Currently Kershaw -151 favorite, over under 7.5, road favorite, by the way. Just split both ways. So Clayton Kershaw not going deep into games. Seems like 5 innings is about the max you'll expect to see from him so far, at least ever since he came back from maybe the second IL stint of his season. He's been awesome, though, and should be very, very dominant against Miami order that's been pretty limited. I'm not sure about the health of Jorge Soler as well, who's been battling, I think, a hip issue. Without him, that zaps an important power bat of that lineup, and there's not really much more than that to the Miami Marlins offense. It's amazing they're still in the race for the playoffs. Really, it's based on playing this park, restricting their opponents to scoring very few runs, and then winning 1-run games, essentially, is how it's gone. Jesus Luzardo has been about as streaky of a pitcher as possible. I do have him in some fantasy teams. I have no idea when he'll be good, when he won't. This should be a really tough matchup for him against the Los Angeles Dodgers, but They also are coming off a really tough series, the Atlanta Braves. So there should be potentially some motivation on the Dodgers side, especially after the long trip to Miami. That might be a little bit of a concern, but they did have the day off on Monday, so that'll be helpful. I don't know if I necessarily want to back Luzardo because I just don't. It's really hard for me to trust what he's going to perform or what he's going to go out there and do. I do feel like it's going to be hard to see runs in this game, even with a Dodgers lineup that is so powerful and so potent and really has something to prove after the Dodgers really hosted the Braves and were kind of outclassed in their own ballpark. Next, I'll move to the Mets at the Washington Nationals. Jose Quintana at Patrick Corbin. Currently, Quintana minus 138 favorite on the road. Over under is 9, slightly juiced to the over. I'm surprised to say it. I mean, Quintana's been good. Never really strikes out a ton of batters, but has kind of done that his whole career. So I trust who he is. His numbers have been good. And he's going to pitch to contact against a Washington National team that does contact the ball a lot. Now, I don't know necessarily that's a bad thing for Quintana because he's a master at getting weak contact or maybe getting the ball hit right at people. I think the scariest thing for Quintana, if he's not missing bats, are facing teams that have a lot of power in them, which the Washington Nationals do not. I think Corbin on the other side has been one of the worst pitchers ever since he signed that big deal and won the World Series, which I guess was probably worth it for the Nationals, but it's been a slog ever since then. And he's been awful, but he's had some really good starts in him. The Mets aren't exactly playing for much at this point in the season. It's a little bit expensive for me to see Quintana with his pitch to contact ways and on a team that's got nothing to play for with big questions all over in terms of motivation. I think the Washington Nationals at home in front of their home crowd should get an extra boost. Plus they're motivated because they're trying to win spots for next year. Whereas the Mets, I think, are really just like waiting to see what happens and seeing where the chips fall next season. I'm interested in Washington getting that 127 if I have to pick something from that matchup. Next, we'll go to St. Louis visiting Atlanta. Miles Mikolas on the mound with his pitch to contact ways. Very scary going into Atlanta, which feels like Coors Field Southeast, essentially. Not exactly the same type of hitting environment, but with considering how deep the Atlanta Braves lineup is and maybe the humidity and that kind of the way it zaps energy and fatigues a pitcher, that's pretty important. I think don't have a starter yet for Atlanta. It's probably coming up someone from the minors, maybe a Smith Shawver or something of that nature. I think he's been dealing with injury, so maybe not him, but don't really want to speculate and don't really care too much because I don't think St. Louis is very likely to make my card. If anything, it'd be over, but it should be a pretty high number from what I'm expecting. So next we'll move to San Francisco at Chicago. Ryan Walker looks like a bullpen game for San Francisco at Kyle Hendricks, who's been really great in his return to the Cubs, who are also fighting their way potentially into the playoffs. Hendricks, a minus 138 favorite, feels really short against the San Francisco bullpen game. We saw today pitching was dominant despite it being pretty hot at Wrigley with the wind blowing out. Didn't seem to matter too much for those starting pitchers. To me, it's Cubs or nothing. I'm pretty off of San Francisco on bullpen games unless they're facing a really bad team and somehow are getting a price they shouldn't because they're in the playoff race. I think Chicago, this is a big series for them, get a bunch of wins while Milwaukee's kind of struggling and Cincinnati's kind of falling off the pace a little bit. Got a good win today, but we'll see if that continues. I think it's really going to be a Chicago or nothing for me series, especially after I didn't back Logan Webb today. Colorado then visit Arizona. Kyle Freeland at Brandon Pfaadt. Pfaadt a minus $2, $200 favorite at home. Gigantic price. Certainly could see a fairly good idea backing Colorado, considering Arizona is really overpriced and Pfaadt has really not delivered on his awesome minor league numbers. I think he had the most strikeouts in all of minor league baseball, maybe in minor league history last year, if I remember correctly. It hasn't been the same. He's really been very hittable. Has been struggling to miss bats in the majors this year. Not sure what to expect from a Colorado lineup that's pretty weak, especially on the road away from Coors. Over under is 9, so there's not really a lot of expectation in terms of runs here. So lower total, certainly a big home favorite. Probably less likely the road team does much here. I think if this number keeps climbing, though, if you're looking to play something in this matchup, maybe fading Brandon Pfaadt with a Colorado run line might make sense. A plus 1.5, so they lose by a single run. They don't get that last at bat in the 9th inning. Might just win by a single run, and then you get out of there and you make some money on the rocks. So maybe that's how to do it. I don't know that'll make my card, but it's something to think about. Philadelphia then visits San Diego. Had a wild one that just ended tonight. Phillies up 8-1 and then had to hold on for dear life. with tying runs on base in the ninth with a 9-7 victory. Craig Kimbrell came in the eighth, which is very interesting, but is intelligent and is how you should be playing baseball. Faced the top of the order and struggled, but ultimately kept it close enough, or at least kept his team in the lead. And they ended up holding on for a victory when Alvarado came in for the save. I'm not sure what to expect with the bullpen in this matchup tonight on Tuesday that we're discussing. We got Michael Lorenzen visiting Avila from San Diego. I think it's Pedro, I'm not certain, but anyway, Lorenzen a minus 111 favorite right now on the road. Over under it's 8.5 with all the juice to the over. So expecting some runs, which would be understandable based on tonight, but based on both these two teams really being high slugging percentage offenses. San Diego's really has struggled all season with runners in scoring position. Philadelphia doesn't seem to matter. Everyone's in scoring position because everyone hits home runs in that team. Lorenzen's been certainly up and down, had that no-hitter, but then was pretty bad in his couple starts after that. He threw a lot of pitches. This should be a little bit different of a spot for him to pitch, but after Taijuan Walker tonight barely held on to an 8-1 lead and barely got through 5 innings, I'm a little worried about Lorenzen, even if he gets delivered a fairly big lead, holding on to it because he doesn't really miss bats well enough at all. For that reason, I don't like the minus 111 on Philadelphia on the road. I don't know what it would take for me to back San Diego here, but that's my lean, and to over as well if I had to pick a total, I guess, for this game as well. Moving now to the American League of Minnesota and Sonny Gray. Tyler Bybee from the Cleveland Guardians. Blowout tonight. Giolito was awful. He's really hard to trust, unfortunately. Sonny Gray has been awesome this year, probably the most dependable Minnesota Twin starter, certainly starting pitcher. Bybee's been incredible, really delivered on good minor league numbers, has been so good, I think, for a rookie pitcher. Kind of surprised to see him still going. Certainly always worried about them potentially pulling him early, but this is a big series for Cleveland. It's like the last chance to gain ground directly against the Minnesota Twins and try to get themselves back in the race. I think they're now 7 games back with, I guess, 1 month left to go. It's going to be pretty hard to overturn, but we'll see. Currently, Gray minus 109 favorite on the road. Over under is 8, juice to the under. It's Cleveland or nothing here for me. Want to get tonight's result out of there or out of our minds. But Bybee will keep this team in the game. I still like the Cleveland bullpen better at the end than Minnesota's. We saw that in their series last week, which Cleveland were pretty, I mean, they trailed one of the games they won in dominant fashion in extra innings, I guess, but they're always in it. Minnesota's, I think, pretty weak in that area in the bullpen. I think it's going to, I mean, if they get in the playoffs, I don't expect them to go far whatsoever, but current waiting, and I think I'll wait to see Cleveland move to getting odds, which I think they will, especially after seeing where tonight's line closed. But over under at 8 feels pretty high. Probably would look at a first half under if you want to play under there and don't expect a lot of runs like I do not. Boston then visits Tampa Bay. Cutter Crawford at Zach Eflin. Eflin, probably the best Tampa pitcher for the whole season. Glasnow certainly has a better profile and has been better since he joined the rotation later in the season, but Eflin's been so good, hard to complain about him. Currently Eflin a minus 154 favorite, over under is 8.5, juice heavily to the under. Cutter Crawford doesn't go deep in games, so especially to avoid bullpens and Manfred men extra inning runners, I think I'd probably go first 5 under if anything here, but I don't know that Crawford's good enough for me to want to play the Boston Red Sox as a side on the road. Tough place to go. Tampa's so good at home, and Boston kind of stole one today. So I'm not sure I expect a repeat of that, especially not against what looks like the most consistent arm of the Tampa Bay rotation this season. Detroit then visits New York for, I guess, a rematch of last week's series where the Yankees were pretty dominant, I felt, in Detroit, despite almost, I guess, pulling off, I think, a road sweep last weekend. Faedo is towing the bump for the Detroit, I was going to say Lions, too much NFL prep, Detroit Tigers. And the Yankees got Garrett Cole on the mound. He's a minus 230 favorite, gigantic, but really not that big considering how expensive Cole can be from time to time. Over under is 8, all the way juiced to the over. I would expect more runs. Faedo has actually been a little bit better than I would expect him to be this season. Came off the IL, I think had a middle fingernail removed, which felt like that was going to be horrible for a starting pitcher, but was pretty good. In a bunch of starts that I've watched of him this year, gets a New York Yankees lineup that hasn't really hit much at all. I'm not expecting too much from the Detroit side here, but also doesn't seem like Spencer Torkelson is going to keep up his home run every game pace. He was doing that for about a week and then had a really bad week last week against the Yankees. Were involved in a lot of that. So without him and Kerry Carpenter kind of carrying the load, it's hard to really see or try to expect Detroit to do much to the Yankees. So don't really have a lot of feelings here, but maybe a way to back Cole at a much lesser price or lower price than minus 230 is to potentially play a first 5 under. The White Sox then visit Kansas City. Dylan Cease at Brady Singer. Singer coming off. He was getting, I think they were trying to rest his arm a little bit. I mean, he's been around this whole season, was getting hit harder than any other pitcher in Major League Baseball for the first half of the year, it seemed. But then it's kind of started to show some signs that he was going to be back to that end of season dominant pitcher he was last season in 2022. But then got shut down, I think, to get some extra rest for his arm, had a bereavement leave list, I believe. So a lot of stuff going on for him. And currently Singer is a minus 112 favorite at home to Dylan Cease and the White Sox. Cease got a win last start out, despite giving up 4 runs, trailing 4-0, 4-0 after the first inning in Baltimore. Pretty incredible comeback. I think a lot due to Kyle Gibson getting smashed. But, it happens. Pitcher gets shelled. You just hang in there and then you can pull off and get a win. Cease is going to strike out a lot of guys. We know that's going to happen, though Kansas City is a little bit more of a contact-oriented team. The biggest question is what he does, how many walks he allows, and then when he does struggle to get the fastball by his opponent, how many runners are on base and how many will score when the ball hits the wall or goes over it. So that's a big question. I think there's some value in Kansas City minus 112 right now. It's a little probably more expensive after the dominant win today. But at this point, Singer, there's a lot to question about what's going on with him off the field, unfortunately. So that might be enough to hold me back. Over under at 9.5 right now, juiced heavily to the under. You might see that come back down to the 9, which it initially opened at, but that's probably where you're going to see some jockeying, some battling between over and under players, and potentially some trying to play both sides and get good numbers. But it ceases too hard for me to trust right now. So it's Kansas City or nothing. And we'll see, maybe there might be some money coming in on the White Sox, though they certainly haven't looked like they've deserved it for a while. Houston then visits Texas. A big rematch from a loss today for Texas, despite having a big lead early. The Astros are starting Framber Valdez. That's been confirmed, but it looks like Nathan Eovaldi is going to toe the bump for the Texas Rangers. Really, I think out of desperation, more so than any sort of that this was the desired effect. I don't think Eovaldi's done any rehab assignment coming off a tired arm or dead arm or period where he was throwing nowhere near the high velocity that he's used to relying upon, and was not pitching anywhere near the high lofty standards he set early in the season. So this is a really tough spot for Texas. The bullpen has been a disaster. Bruce Bochy looks like the game has passed him by and really has no idea what he's doing. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a lot of options, but it hasn't been going very, very well for Boch either. Looks like the line has just come up now. The Astros are a slight favorite. Valdez minus 115 on the road. Over under is 9. Looks like the juice is split both ways on the total. So my biggest interest is on the Houston side. I want to see if they move to an underdog like they closed today, or I think they probably closed like a slight underdog at best, a little bit better than pick'em I think you can get for Houston. But I'll be keeping my eyes out, seeing if this number changes. I can't imagine that it will. I think that would be a really silly move and make me kind of scratch my head a little bit, but we're also in now September 5th on the calendar. It will read when you're listening to this for the Tuesday Major League Baseball cards. So at this point, I'm trusting my numbers and my intuition more so than the marketplace at this juncture, though of course always worth it to listen to it. Next, go to Baltimore, visiting the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Dean Kramer at Reed Detmers. Kramer's been awesome. Been some doubt across Twitter and across the gambling marketplace that Kramer could keep it up, but he's been so good. He pitches for a great team. I'm a believer. As on the other side, the Angels and Reed Detmers, he's had great strikeout numbers. That's been kind of fleeting in the bigs when he's been up this year. I'm not sure that I believe a ton in Reed Detmers at this point, especially against a good Baltimore lineup and one that rested Adley Rutschman on Monday night. Currently Kramer's a minus 145 favorite on the road, though. So that's a gigantic price. It's probably gonna be way too big for me to even get to a number where I'd feel any sort of comfort with Dean Kramer and the Baltimore Orioles. They're a much better team than the Angels, and they're priced that way, but I think they deserve to be. The over-under is 9 right now, split juice both ways. You could say that there's probably going to be fewer runs scored because there's two pitchers that have certainly very high top-end talent, specifically Detmers and potentially Baltimore's bullpen behind Kramer, but there's a lot of questions for me there. Last but not least, in the AL, and then we got one interleague matchup. We have Toronto visiting Oakland. We got Chris Bassett at Kent Waldichuk, and currently Bassett, formerly, I guess, used to pitch for the Oakland Athletics, was really good in that ballpark, has always had really good home splits. Bassett currently a minus 180 favorite on the road. Over-under is 8.5, juice slightly to the over. Got, I think, 1 2/3 innings out of the Toronto closer, Jordan Romano, tonight. So I'm not sure that he'll be available for this one. And Toronto needs everything they can, though. So I think he only threw in like the 25 range of pitches. So it's very possible he pitches in this matchup. And the Jays are trying to fight their way to that third wild card just to find their way into the dance. So it might be all hands on deck, though. I'm sure Jordan Hicks can close this game out if necessary. Waldichuk's good strikeout stuff, but pretty wild at times. Toronto's lineup hasn't been very good this year, but I'm certainly not really looking to find reasons to back the Oakland Athletics, especially against good teams that are fighting for the playoffs. Waldichuk getting 165 looks fairly nice considering how good his arm can be at times, but I think there's a lot more that Oakland needs to prove, and they've proven like a team that I don't want to back at this point in the season. Last but not least, before we get to best bets, Seattle at Cincinnati. We got Bryce Miller at a call-up. Looks like Phillips starting for Cincinnati. Don't have a huge amount on him, but Bryce Miller really struggles with home runs, and he's pitching in one of the worst parks for home runs in the bigs. That's a scary little combination there. I'll put it that way. Right now, Miller is a minus 154 favorite based on Seattle's really great play as of late, though. Unfortunately, it's kind of had a tough weekend, potentially impacted by their do everything MVP not playing for some of the games. But Julio Rodriguez did come back. Well, I think he homered on Monday afternoon. But on Cincinnati side, they've been struggling to hit the ball, I got to say, but had a good win today. They've been kind of up and down. Really, every game is an adventure with Cincinnati, especially with the bullpen, which can come in and completely blow up anything that's out there. Over under is 10, a little bit juice to the over, though that's been coming down a little bit since open. I think my biggest interest in that matchup is in that over, just because I think Seattle's starting pitcher is his biggest weakness is home runs. He's in the Great American Small Park or ballpark, feeling like the smallest ballpark in all of Major League Baseball with huge home run rates, which is dangerous. We got a no name from Cincinnati that's coming in here who I don't think has much prospect pedigree because I hadn't really heard of him before. Not that I know all of these guys that are pitching in AA, but hasn't been on my radar. So I feel like that's probably a spot start, going to put a lot of pressure on a Cincinnati bullpen. So that's pretty scary. I'm not sure necessarily that's something I want to back potentially as a home underdog, though. As anyone listens to any of the podcasts I do, whether it's soccer, football, college basketball, or baseball, I love home dogs, but I'm not sure there's enough there for me just yet. And so I guess I might as well so if you're not a patron subscriber, a patron at Patreon, go check it out, patreon.com/thereal_G Warner. That's the best spot to get all your access to me. You can have, you can really talk amongst a bunch of the other patrons as well. Daily plays, of course, trying to egg me on to play a little bit more or try to go up the risk curve a little bit and make some more bets than potentially I was going to make, which has, I think, worked out fairly well over this great run in the Major League Baseball season as of late. Want to also mention the NFL podcast I just put out with one of my loyal and dearest friends, Andrew Schnicker. Check that out. We're going to do NFL stuff coming out each one pod a week, probably on Tuesday nights going forward. So check that out. Of course, soccer stuff, betting the pitch will still continue, as this is what it was all known for. But trying to figure out what the best bang for the buck is to get as many listeners as possible and keep you all engaged, especially because I know that a lot of times the soccer fans take some time off during the international break, which we have for the next week or two. Other than that, I guess if you're on wherever you're listening, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, subscribe, leave a 5-star review wherever you can, like some videos. That would all be greatly appreciated. Of course, Comments will be respected, read. If I see them, direct me to them. Anything you got, slide in some DMs as well. The real underscore G Warner on Twitter. Hit the follow button. Slide in if you want me to bring up something on the next podcast. Happy to discuss whatever is interesting to you, because I'm sure it'll be interesting and it's probably something that others are thinking as well. So I guess once I get this little camera on the side ready, I'll go in and make my best bet for this episode. So this is a real underscore G Warner. This is Betting the Pitch, Major League Baseball Tuesday night edition. And you're here for the best part of the episode, and that's for the best bet. So I'm going to give out the Cleveland Guardians. They are a slight -101, so right about even money underdog right now. They on Tuesday night hosting the Minnesota Twins in a big battle for the AL Central. This is really the make or break series for Cleveland. Had an awful, embarrassing evening on Monday night. But Tanner Bybee is a starting arm that I trust, has been great all year. And honestly, even in a game where Sonny Gray, who's been good himself, even in a game that's close late, I think Cleveland's a better side, that you trust them at home. They should be a favorite late in the game if it's not a Minnesota lead. So take Cleveland -101. You might even wait a little bit, especially after the blowout loss tonight. You might get a better price. But take the Guardians, my best bet for this Tuesday edition of Betting the Pitch, Major League Baseball. And that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Of course, any feedback you got, let me know, and I will talk to you all soon.